Arab steamer sizzled in the midday sun as she lay in the dark, dank, tepid water of the Bay of Marrakesh. Just below the waterline in his filthy cabin, Jack Hawkins, first mate, knew that he had come to the back door, the last drainage canal of civilization. He paused for a moment, looking at his sleepy, disheveled face in the mirror, steamed over by the indescribable heat. Through the walls of the vessel, he could hear the sinister sound of the guttural voices of the natives. The marketplace roared on just outside the walls of his poor, hoveled, his dank, indescribably filthy, rotten, tiny ship as it hove and heaved back and forth in the dank, smelly, stinky water. You want me to do my famous impression of Marrakesh tonight, since Marrakesh is in the news, do you? The indescribable heat as that great brassy sun swings like an enormous pendulum of death back and forth through that fantastic Saharan sky. Back and forth it swings, and each swing brings that unbelievable heat closer to the marrow of the poor, suffering, frying flotsam of human existence. Yes, and the filthy natives moving back and forth in their long, winding skeins through the marketplace, their withered hands reaching out for Did you hear about the Tuareg that they caught here? You want to hear more about that? the Tuareg that came in. Did you hear that story? Well, I'll tell you, this is a very interesting place that they're having wars in these days, Algeria. That Saharan desert. If you're flying over, you don't hear much about this in the news either, but if you're flying over the Saharan desert, I assume you're flying over it. If you ever get down on it, it's an interesting thing there. But if you're flying over the Saharan desert, it's almost the same as if you're flying over an ocean. But an ocean that is a strange rose, rust, pink, kind of a sepia color. And it has waves in it, as far as the eye can see, waves. And yes, they from the air, from maybe 20 or 30,000 feet. The Sahara Desert, the dunes in the desert look exactly like waves. They don't look at all like dunes. And they have the same conformation, and of course they come from much of the same reasons. It is literally a sea of sand. A true desert is genuinely a sea. It has a bottom. You can go down through the sand and finally reach the bottom, just like you reach the bottom of the ocean. And it has shelves under it, and it has all the things that any other ocean would have. But this happens to be waters of sand. And just like waters anywhere, they swallow things up. They are still finding, for example, in the Sahara, they're still finding airplanes that landed there during World War II and gradually were swallowed up by the sand. It takes a little longer to sink into the sand than it does to, say, sink into the waters of Jamaica Bay. But nevertheless, you sink eventually until finally you disappear completely. And they claim that no one knows exactly what is under the sands of the Sahara. Oh yes, there could be almost anything. They just don't know what's there. And from time to time they will dig up a complete B-24, just sitting there, completely preserved by the sand. And they'll dig it up, and there it is. They'll even find things like log books. You remember that famous case of the B? Was it a B-24? Sure. That went the wrong way one day, flying somewhere. One of our well-trained navigators, and they went the wrong way, and they finally ran out of gas or something, and they came down right in the middle of the thing, and that was it. They marched off towards the horizon and left their plane there, and of course the plane quietly sank into the sand. I know that there are endless numbers of pieces of equipment of the German army there, and there are endless pieces of equipment of Roman armies, all kinds of armies that have marched back and forth and have nibbled at the edges of the Sahara. It just like the sea, you know, there's that down in the sea, the actual ocean, there probably are more pieces of war. There are more things left over from wars than from any other human endeavor. Really, I can't think of anything that's dropped more stuff on the bottoms of oceans than wars. And they're continually digging up around the Greek islands, for example. They're digging up pieces of Roman warships and Greek warships, of course. Warships from the Phoenicians. And almost always it's a warship. They'll dig up chunks of iron and they'll dig up shields. And down in the Caribbean, they're continually digging up Spanish warships, cannons and one thing and another. And so in the great desert outside of Marrakesh and Algiers, there are these things floating around in that sea of sand. And as you come in, I don't know why I got started on this. I heard him mentioning Marrakesh on the news. But as you come from the south, it is a surprise to arrive at civilization. All of a sudden, you arrive at the ocean. It's just strange. It's just suddenly you're arriving at the ocean, and the cities, Algiers, and I'll tell you one of the spookiest sights in the world is to fly over the Sahara Desert and look down on the desert, and to see down on the desert an oasis or a tiny village that appears to be floating. It's like a raft. You get the sense of it floating on top of this part of the world. It doesn't become part of it. It's floating. It's just sort of floating there, and you see it way over, a little tiny dot, and you'll see a few little tracks around it where somebody's driven a Land Rover or a Jeep or something out into the sand, and that's about the extent of it. One of the sights that I remember seeing from the air above the desert, the Sahara, was the sun, of course, is there is no way, unless you have ever been in equatorial Africa, and particularly in the desert regions of Africa, there is no way to describe the sun, because everybody thinks in terms of the sun he's known. He just thinks of it as a little hotter. He remembers the hot day one time on the Cape, or he remembers the time he drove out west and it was really hot there, that place that he hit outside of Salt Lake City. Well, let me tell you this. The sun out there is to use a phrase, it's something else again. It really is. It's something else again. And the sky is continually a kind of a brassy color. It is a color that is roughly, it's like very tarnished sort of light. So if you can imagine Reynolds wrap that somehow has gotten a slight gold color to it. This is the way the sky looks there. The sun really, it's hard to see the sun in it all because it looks like the sky is one vast sun. Yeah, and the reason it's this way is because when they have the sandstorms there, it picks up tons of sand, millions of tons of sand apparently, and puts it into orbit. And the sand is flying in space at maybe 70, 80, 90,000 feet above the Earth. And it forms a kind of scrim, literally a scrim. You know what is it, a scrim in showbiz? It's like gauze, that the light shines through. Well, it forms a kind of scrim between the Earth and the sun itself, thereby diffusing the sky. And so you get a strange light there that is just unbelievable light. And then when the sun goes down there, oh boy, is it down. Boom, it's gone. There's no such thing as twilight on the desert. You shoom, pow, it's gone. Well, sun, you're walking around, and all of a sudden they turn the lights out, just bloop. And that's one of the great dangers of the desert. A guy will go out, and if he's not careful, he'll go out and he'll get caught after dark, and it plummets. The temperature just drops immediately. The temperature just drops, and you feel like you're freezing to death because of the great contrast. 1 minute it's 125 degrees with nothing stirring except a wind that is composed of red-hot needles. And then you're walking around in that, and suddenly it's 50 degrees. Whoop! Just like that, it'll drop 65 degrees in about 10 minutes. And boy, does that crack you into the marrow of your bones. Well, one of the wild sights I remember seeing, now I'm not going to continue. You want to hear more about this desert world? Well, this is the kind of world, the people who live in this world, because of the world, are very different from you and me. Now, this is an obvious remark, but they're different for very basic reasons, and reasons we rarely consider. They're truly primal people. Life and death is continually with them, death especially. And so naturally their attitude towards one another and their attitude towards life and death itself is different from a kind of people like we are, who can hide death from ourselves. We don't see much in the way of death. And wandering out just beyond the pale in the Sahara are various tribes of one kind or another. I made a trip one time from one time, just the only time I ever did it. I went from Kano, which is northern Nigeria, to Algiers, and that crosses directly over the area of the Bedouin tribes, the Tuaregs. The Tuaregs are a very special group of people in this world. They're living in it's hard to say the Middle Ages or the Dark, because they're not really at all. They're living in Tuareg world. It is never in contact with any of the other worlds. Speaking of being out of, this is WOR AM and FM New York. Speaking of other worlds, but they wander around. They're truly a nomadic tribe, but they're one of the last tribes on the face of the globe that practice, as a matter of course, slavery. And the French have fought it, or did when the French were in Algeria. The French had made it illegal, one thing and another, but the Tuaregs do, and they're a very high caste of nomadic tribe, extremely high. They're almost like they almost have practically a mythic status, and you'll see Tuaregs around, and the Tuareg men are something else again. This is really a phenomenon, which a Tuareg man galloping down McDougal Street would throw fright, believe me, he would throw waves of fright into the population that would not stop, I would say would roughly stop around Teaneck, and would be felt well over into Babylon. I'm serious. This guy, I can just see this guy galloping through there on his Arabian. Oh yeah, or his camel, even better. I can see him come roaring down the street in his camel, and his robes are flying. His eyes are flashing behind that thing that they wear, the bottom of the burnous, and they usually carry with them the family sword. He comes whistling against traffic, of course. He comes whistling up McDougal Street, and he's 6'4". And let me tell you, things change. Believe me, they'd know it in Rienzi. They'd know it right there. There'd be a stir. Well, these people do. They have a quality about them. If you've ever been around the Tuaregs, you'll never forget it. They have a quality. If you think you've been put down, believe me, if you think you've been cut to ribbons by somebody who figures you are worse than dirt, whoo! Let me tell you, a Tuareg will look through you and you begin to feel like you're a fire plug. And there's been a lot of dogs around. And he just looks you, oh yes, usually they don't even look. They just shoof, they go right past, their robes going, and you'll see 7 Tuareg men going past, and it's like watching 9 clipper ships go up 6th Avenue. I mean, surrounded by a lot of battered Plymouth taxi cabs. They go move upstream there, and you'll hear rumors in the background that there are such things as Tuareg women. But believe me, women are women there. They stay in the tent, and there's not much heard from the ladies there. However, let me say this: there are a lot of myths that if you ever get tangled with a Tuareg lady, you had better leave pretty quick for Iceland. Because the Tuareg men have ideas about that, and not only ideas, they have a method. Oh yes. Now the eye for the eye technique still operates there, tooth for tooth, and they don't stop at teeth and hands. They go other places there, and so they're very, very primitive people, and yet at the same time highly developed. Well, now here's the point of all this. Not long ago, you remember the great, if you've ever read much in the way of archaeology, there was one of the great breakthroughs in archaeological research was in the 19th century. A man deciphered the Rosetta Stone. And this led to a lot of other discoveries and a lot of other theories and so on as a result of the deciphering of this particular stone, which was a stone found in that area. It was a tablet, an unknown language, and from this great breakthrough stems many of the things that we know about the ancient world. Well, I think it was not more than 6 or 7 months ago, a Tuareg was they brought this Tuareg in somehow. He was a high, noble Tuareg, and he was brought in to be asked something, talked about one thing or another, and he was, I believe it was in Cairo, he was in Cairo with a group of scientists or people, just people, and he was being taken around and shown the city. He was being shown the sights. Of course, these are majestic people. You've never seen anything like a Tuareg, believe me. And he was being shown around, and they were taking him through a museum because he, of course, was a direct descendant of a lot of the ancient nomadic tribes that were represented there. This was his world he was looking at. Well, they walked along, and they came to this fragment of clay, a tablet containing writings similar to, and perhaps even the same, I'm not sure of the exact details of the story, to that contained on the Rosetta Stone. He bent over, and they're watching him, and his lips are moving. He's reading it. He's reading it, and they ask him about it. They were dumbfounded, and he said, "Why, yes, he reads this. This is a form that his tribe uses quite often, and they read it, and that's the end of it. It was a current operating thing with them." He says, "Of course, the language is a little archaic there. They use a few phrases that are a little old-fashioned." This chunk of pottery was about 4,000 years old. Well, this gives you an idea, and of course they were thrown completely. No one had ever thought of going out into the desert and asking the Tuaregs to read the Rosetta Stone. And they had deciphered this whole thing with tremendous sweat, blood, and tears over years, and broken through, and no one had ever asked this. It would be like a group of Eskimos have somehow dug up a copy of the Daily News, and they spend 400 years trying to decipher it, and they never asked the baseball fan who was living 20 feet away in his own hut. They go out and say, "What is this?" He'd start reading the ball scores. Well, that's exactly what happens. So it gives you an idea of what kind of a land they're talking about in the news. This is not an extension of Westport. It isn't even like the Wild West world. It has nothing very much to do with Gary Cooper. Wagon train. It's a different kind of a desert and a different kind of frontier there. It really is a frontier. Now, they have the institution of slavery there has a lot of ramifications. When I was in the northern Nigeria area, which is the beginning of this area, there are a lot of legends about it, and a lot of facts too. And in talking to people about it, you'll find that they're very close-mouthed. And then eventually, if you just hang around a while, they'll start telling you things. And the business of being a slave there is different from what we think of a slave. Most of the slaves in that area consider it an honor. It's like if, say, for example, if you are a slave, we have that kind of thing in our society. That are people who are in voluntary slavery of one kind or another. Now, I'm not talking about the guy that works in an office. That's another kind. I'm talking about people who will cast their lot in with a famous person and be a slave. I've known people like that, many of them, who literally are slaves. This is a really an interesting phenomenon in our time. Have you watched guys like Jerry Lewis, for example, who will walk around and they will have 27 little guys that will trail after him, and they'll jump up and they'll rush out and get anything for him. They'll tie his shoe. If he says, "Jump out of the window, Manny," out the window he goes. Well, no, that's the truth, because these people feel a great sense of identity by being associated with a star or a giant figure. Well, the Tuareg is, and so there are many there are many tribes that never made it. These are tribes that just flub around, and they don't quite make it. They're out there, so it's bad business being in an unsuccessful nomadic tribe. That's not very good. So over the centuries, the Tuaregs took slaves and made slaves of these tribes, and the tribes then felt great. They made it, They were part of the Tuareg world, even, and so now today, the interesting thing about slavery is it still continues. Don't think for a minute it doesn't. It continues, and in the part of the world that's in the news. I'm sorry, I didn't even plan to do this show tonight. Of this, is it all right? You're not being bored there. Anybody want to hear more about this part of the world? Well, the slavery there is done under different conditions than we think of slavery. For example, a man will be a slave and never see his master. For example, yes, a man will be working in a city. Let's say in a city or a town, really, in the village, Timbuktu or wherever it might be. He will be working in a place. And it seems that he is, he's just one of the citizens there. But actually, he isn't. The truth is that he belongs to some high-born Tuareg. And his family has belonged to this Tuareg, or that Tuareg's ancestors, for a couple of 100 years. And if that Tuareg decides to come into town and take him out, he goes. That's the end of it. If the Tuareg decides that all of his income that he earns in the town is to come to him, it will so be it. But that is a kind of slavery we're not used to seeing around. We're used to the tote that bar, lift that bale, and guys sitting on the porch of the old plantation and plunking banjos. That is not at all the kind of slavery they have there. Now, there are different types of slavery. For example, one of the kind of slaveries they have there, which is boy, Kinsey would have a field day there. They have a lot of things going that believe me, that the most hip person you know of could not even comprehend it. He doesn't know where this starts. This is they've been practicing things for generations, which it's just not even a theory on the part of us. Because it's been now Omar, of course, Omar again. We think we understand Omar, the tent maker. A jug of wine, a loaf of bread, and thou beside me singing in the wilderness. Well, he was not talking about the big woods. Nope. Their wilderness was another kind of wilderness, and the loaf of bread and the jug of wine and even the thou was an entirely different concept. Now they were not playing Anthony Perkins and Audrey Hepburn. When in their concept of love and their concept of sex. We could go into that particular aspect. That's later on. Yeah. That will go on immediately following the program. We will carry that on for the graduate students here, and we will that will not appear on the exam. However, the idea of the world that's existing out there in that area of the world, it is only fitting and natural to those people that a strong man would be in charge of the world. When these people use such words as democracy and so on that we hear continually in our world, it doesn't mean at all the same thing that we think it does in our world, in our context. Nor does, incidentally, the term strong man mean the same thing that we think of as a strong man. We often think of a guy who heads a political party and is like a Boss Crump, is a strong man. Well, they mean it literally. Usually their strong men are literally strong men. I mean, they go back into the chieftain idea, where the chief led his forces and his people not only spiritually but physically. That he was the indisputed boss of everything he surveyed. The boss. In fact, they touch on that. I'm a sheik of Araby. That phrase, you want me to sing my song? which will tie in nicely with it. And I'm continually intrigued by listening to the news, by how we reduce all the things in the news to our own known world. And so we will hear about this problem and this revolution or this rebellion or this war that's going on in this place. And I'm wondering whether or not we ever really think about it. Now we're talking about these men hiding out in the hills of Algiers. Well, do you know how those hills look? You have any idea what that's like, hiding out in the hills of Algiers? Well, are they hiding in the hills? Or do they always live in the hills? Which is more like the case. Now, when the head of the government decides they're going to mobilize all the resistance fighters and they're going to go there and fight these guys, but this is a fight that's been going on for centuries. They've always fought. The Tuaregs have always fought. The Tuaregs and many of the other tribes have always fought against the tribe who might be, let's say, to use the term very generically, the tribe that's in the city that's controlling the government, whatever it might be. They fought the French. French never did fix them. I mean, they never will. There will be no government ever, at least in our time, that will ever. And this is great to know that there is truly a wild people left, truly a wild and free type, because you see, that's the only way that you can live in the desert. The only way you can live in the desert and be a desert tribesman is to be free. By definition, it is that the laws that apply in the city certainly cannot apply to a bare, and talk about a bare subsistence level, wow, to a level of subsistence and life that and yet, oddly enough, the life that these people lead in the nomadic life has its own voluptuous ritual and its own kind of luxury. Has to be defined, what you define as luxury. If you are tromping around the desert, believe me, if you spend 6 weeks in the desert, luxury begins when somebody gives you a quart of water and says, just pour it on your head. I mean, that is really a fantastic piece of luxury. That would be almost the equivalent, if you're broke, walking around Manhattan, and somebody gives you $100 in small change and says, here, throw it in the river. Well, so luxury has many different forms, and what is our luxury is ridiculous to them. Now, if you are 1,000 miles, and that's another thing too that we don't really talk much about, is the vast distances that these people live in. They see a sky that does not stop. They see a horizon that goes on and on and on, and you never arrive at it. Buildings never overshadow them. And so man stands alone to these people. Man stands alone, and there is nothing between him and whatever avenging forces there are out there, up there, or around there, or somewhere. He stands naked, truly naked. And he really does. And so they do and operate on a completely different level of operation, extremely ritualistic and moral. The morality of these people is, and of course, again, it's their morality, but the morality is almost totally inflexible because it is so old. Not only old, it is it's something. It's a morality that has grown out of a very circumscribed existence. And so it's not so easy to break it down. You know, just say, well, tomorrow morning it's going to be like Cleveland, and we're going to get Barry Goldwater's going to go over there, and Henry Cabot Lodge is going to get over there, and we're going to send the mission there, and we're going to send them some TV guides, and the next thing you know, we're going to have television going there, and Ben Casey will be swearing. No, it's not, not quite that. I've often wondered what a Tuareg thinks when he looks at the Ed Sullivan Show. Just what does he think about it? You know, what goes on through his mind? What visions does he see? What would a Tuareg think? Now, here, for example, here in Time magazine, here, Time. I tore this thing out, a full-page ad, and it's an ad for Better Homes and Gardens, a magazine, and the ad shows it shows a lot of people in the backyard there, and they're fixing a barbecue, and the kids are sitting there, and the dog is running around, and they're frying steaks on the barbecue out there. First of all, that would be an interesting concept to an Arab. This little family, and what would really fascinate him is the fact that the man is doing really the work there. He's got a chef. He's working there. He's cooking. You see, this would be blasphemy to a Tuareg. Well, the man is cooking, and the girl is all dressed, and she's standing back there pouring something for the kids, and under it is the caption, "We write the scripts for America's greatest family acts." Now there's full show business now in full swing. We write the scripts for America's Greatest. How is your family act out there, by the way? Who's playing the buffoon in your act? You know, in every act there has to be one who's the fall guy. You know what they mean by the fall guy? You know what a fall guy is? The term fall guy stems from vaudeville, you know. He's the guy that does the pratfall. He's the guy like in the Three Stooges, or the fall guy is the one who takes the big fall. They hit him and down he goes. That's the fall guy. Very special man in the act. And even though his technique and his talent was admired, he was also a fall guy in the act, believe it or not. A true fall guy is a fall guy. He's a fall guy. He got the short end of the salary. And so the term fall guy fits very well. Now, I'm not so sure that the Tuaregs would understand. We write the scripts for America's Greatest Family Act. How is your act? Has it been booked? Have you been booked? Have you been working? You got plenty of gigs? How been your reviews lately in your family act out there? Maybe you got a bad script. You know, this could very well be. And a lot of people work for years on bad material and they don't know it. And then all of a sudden one day down the chute they go and they didn't realize that a lot of bad jokes. Nobody, you know, and you just can't get around that. Every good act has to have good publicity. Have you thought of changing your publicity agent and getting yourself some real, let's get something going there? Well, I'm not so sure that a Tuareg would understand that. Now, I am not saying here that a Tuareg should understand it, nor it shows that his life is better, because he would not be able to understand that. I'm merely saying that I'm sure that he would not. And so, can you imagine a man sitting there, he's got a copy of Time, this Tuareg, and the local translator of English, he's looking at the picture the Tuareg is looking at. You see this great hawk-like face, those burning eyes, his burnous is swirled around him. It's a purple and white burnous flowing out in the wind, and he's sitting there, and the guy's showing him Time magazine. He's looking at the picture, and he says, what that mean? And the guy looks at it, and he says, in Tuareg, meaning I will now translate it, sir, and see what they say there. We write the scripts for America's Greatest Family Acts. Showbiz, act, showbiz, whoopee. A long, pregnant pause. Meaning, no comprendi. You have entertainment page there, maybe? Americans believe life itself is entertainment and showbiz. Americans are totally involved in play acting. Everything is make-believe. I see. And he gets on his camel and gallops off. He sees, all right. Well, now this is difficult. I'm just saying. Now, if I read this to you, we write the scripts for America's Greatest Family Acts. You would understand, wouldn't you? Obviously, this is appearing as an ad in a big national magazine. Time is about as big as you can get. And millions of people will read it, and I'm sure that it was not the idea of Better Homes and Gardens to confuse the people. They will understand it, you know. and even under that it says supermarket for food sales. You are a supermarket. It would be hard to tell a Tuareg that a family is considered in America a market. It is not a people, it is a market. It is a consumer. He is a machine which buys things and eats things. He is a machine which pays for things. He is a machine which creates other things. Just like, of course, we look upon that. We look upon it that way. You notice the big controversy currently. We look upon people that way pretty much today. I heard a guy being interviewed on Fay Henley's show one day not long ago. He seemed to be bugged that a lot of people were not in the labor market, as he referred to it. He was talking about 14, 15-year-old kids who are wasting their time in high school studying things they would never use when they could be in the labor market. Well, obviously he was looking upon these people, children, as units in an economic scale. Then I hear another guy talking about we are not utilizing America's women to the fullest. They should be out in the labor market. Again, looking upon the creature as a machine to be part of a market, to make things move, to buy this and sell that, to use that, mostly use that, and pay for this. This is a pretty hard concept for people who are not used to thinking in terms of the human being in other than human terms. Albeit, even though his concept of a human is very different from yours, it's hard to believe that the people would consider that. Now, let's take our controversy of the World's Fair. The fact that the fair will lose X dollars, now that's a loaded question. What he really means, what that argument really means, is the fair will not get $6 million. Now, it doesn't mean that the fair is going to go into the red. Remember that. What that means, now be very careful about the use of these phrases. You've heard the argument. What it means is that instead of making $16 million, it will make 10. So today people define a loss as something you didn't get. Doesn't mean that you've lost something. It means you didn't get it. And so often a big concern will say they lost X numbers of dollars this year. Well, looking very carefully way down at the bottom when they're putting on the poor mouth, there's a great Yiddish phrase which refers to putting on the poor mouth. That's a great phrase. I don't know what it is. Does anyone know it out there? You know that phrase that means putting on the poor mouth? Well, that means the guy that comes around and the money is falling out of his pocket, and he's obviously healthier than anybody. And somebody says, "How are you doing?" He says, "Oh, you have no idea how much troubles I got." Oh, well, he's putting on the poor mouth. Now, this is a great phrase. I wish I knew it. I think one of the richest, greatest languages that is spoken, because it is a language directly connected with human emotion rather than often things, is Yiddish. There's a great language. Well, that language has a lot of phrases for things we don't have. We, when I say we, I'm talking about English. Like, there is no phrase meaning putting on the poor mouth in English. All I can say is that. Well, we do it, though, all the time, but we have no phrase for it. So I'm afraid the fair is putting on a poor mouth. If I had the right phrase, I would apply it to them when they say things like that. Now that is a thing which I'm sure that most of the other people, if they take a Tuareg would not understand that concept. He would understand putting on a poor mouth, though, because he does this quite often in his own dealings. So one of the great art forms in that form of the world is trading. It is truly an art form. It is a drama. It is a battle. It is a victory. It is a defeat. It is everything. To trade is the lifeblood of the excitement of the world of the nomadic tribe. And so he knows about putting on a poor mouth, but he would not understand describing a loss, describing really a profit as a loss. This is something he would not. I've seen companies that will do and will convince all of their employees that they have lost terribly last year, and they will issue a brochure to that effect. Of course, way down at the bottom, what you really see is that instead of the 47.3 millions which they made last year, this year they made 37.3 millions. Thereby, they have lost $6.5 million. And so, naturally, you guys are in trouble. We have to pass this loss on to you guys. and so everybody says, yeah, that's right. They lost. I was sad how they lost. And so the poor little guy who's getting by on $47.50 a week is convinced that since he's working for a losing proposition, he's pretty lucky to be dragging that down. Well, this is the poor mouth technique. I wonder, does anybody know that phrase? No, nobody knows it, huh? I'd like to know that phrase. There is a great phrase. If Phil Tonkin were here, he'd tell me. Yeah, oh yeah. He once in a while. Yeah, oh yeah. He speaks about 9 languages. Yeah, Phil owns a radio station. The other day he was putting on the poor mouth. And oh yeah, back by the Coke machine. And, and I said, come on, Phil. Phil, I said, now you're talking to old Shep, and I happen to know, Phil, that at a wave of your hand, you could fire the entire staff of your radio station, all three of them. And Phil just shrugs his shoulders eloquently and downs his Coke and walks away. You know, there's a way of even holding your shoulders that means putting on the poor mouth. Well, I shouldn't put on the poor mouth. I'm very lucky. Today I got a great big engraved invitation. You know, it's not often that I'm invited to become part of of something important. And today I got an engraved invitation, and you know, it's once in a while you just get touched on the shoulder with the wand, and you know that it isn't all dross. It isn't all hard flint. I was invited today. It says, you are invited to become a member of the National Geographic Society. And it's only going to cost me, I don't know how much a year, but I was touched, and because, you know, when I go, I'm worried. I mean, when the time comes when I have to appear in the obituary pages, I want to have a few things after my name. And I'm not so sure that the Little Orphan Annie Secret Circle is enough. I'm a member of that. I'm a member of 37 unions. I'm not so sure that will be enough. I'd kind of like to have after my name something like National Geographic Society, and under it, in the parentheses, R.E.T. It'll say he held the rank of T5, corporal, at one point in the U.S. Army. He was known as, and you know, these little things. You have to really, I suppose, if you're going to, you have to settle for the small events in life. So, my fellow members of the National Geographic Society, some night let's meet down at the H&H on 14th Street and talk about Himalaya, or the native bells of Bali Bali. We'll talk about those wonderful old pictures that we looked at together, shall we? And those old days when we were subscribing and we were all active, and we took the yearly trip through Tibet with Lowell Thomas. Those were the days, by George. And so keep your knees loose, Dad, and if you meet any Tuaregs, just go the other way fast. Because for one thing, they're fantastically interesting to women. And if you got a chick and you meet a Tuareg, you better go. But if you, on the other hand, well, that's another story, the natives' custom. On WO.